Yo, what's going on, guys? It is I, Billy the Conqueror here, and I am back with another video where I will be discussing, is it a good idea if the comic book industry hits rock bottom? So what I mean by this is, given how poorly so many books have been coming out of not just Marvel, but it's same with DC as well as some independent creator-owned place companies like Image and Boom Studios as well as Dynamite. It makes you think: would it be a good idea if all these companies were to go bankrupt and the industry were to start over again? Now, me personally, I think this might be a good idea because when the industry gets really bad and sales are just dropping consistently and you have such poor quality products, then something has to happen. Something's got to break. And I think it's going to be the industry. Now, a lot of people have been acting like it will be the apocalypse, where if all these companies go bankrupt, then the industry is in the medium as a whole is going to basically die. I don't think this is really going to happen because I think that, kind of like with video games, when the video game crash of the 1980s happened, this wasn't the end of the video game industry as a medium. In fact, that's when Nintendo came in, and then the industry was revitalized, and then Nintendo and Sega basically made it mainstream, and then Sony came in and made it even more of a household like activity by not just kids but also teenagers as well as adults. And then you have Microsoft coming in to expand the medium further, and so on and so forth. So personally, I feel like if the comic books industry were to crash and like Marvel and DC, Image, Dark Horse, and Dynamite or Boom Studios were to go bankrupt, I still think that the industry would be able to revive itself, and it would be reborn in a new separate form, different than what we had before. So yes, granted, publishers that we had grown up with may or would disappear, but it would also mean that in the process, all of the bad creators, all of the poor decisions, the editors and all that stuff might actually go away with the death of the industry, so we get new set of talent and we'd be able to start anew. It's kind of like how some people believe that Hollywood should also hit rock bottom because Hollywood right now is full of like politics, as well as like you have to follow a specific agenda or narrative or you could get blacklisted, because there are tons of actors who are conservative who say that they can't be vocal about their politics, otherwise they could be blacklisted and never get a job again in Hollywood. So it's a real thing. It's the same thing in comic books. Like Ethan Van Sciver, he is a conservative creator, but of course he can't be vocally political, unlike people like Mark Waid or Gail Simone, because he could get blacklisted by the industry and never get a job again. And I'm pretty sure now there's no way he could probably get a job with Marvel and DC anymore after all of this Twitter drama that's been going on. So it's not fair. It's very un-American that conservative creators in the comic book industry have to be afraid for their career if they're vocal about their beliefs. Because as an American, I believe that all citizens have a right to be able to express themselves politically. Because if you're not threatening someone with violence, death, or any sort of physical harm, or actually harassing someone, then you have every right to express your beliefs, saying I believe in such and such, and you shouldn't have to worry about losing your livelihood. Now, a lot of people say that it's not against the Constitution if a private company or something is doing this, but here's the problem. When the founding fathers made the Constitution back in in the 1700s, we didn't have the industrial society that we have today. The Industrial Revolution didn't happen until the 1800s, almost a century afterwards. So basically, the concept of having a private corporation be able to determine your livelihood, like if you get kicked out and ostracized by these corporations because they're all in communication with each other, and your presence online as well can follow you wherever you go. The founding fathers were not thinking of this in the future. They couldn't see into the future and see that Twitter, Facebook, Apple, Google, Disney, Warner Brothers, DC Comics, all these different media conglomerates would be a staple in the American life, So, yeah. So the argument that it only counts as censorship if the government is doing is bullshit, because we live in a very privatized society right now where almost all Americans' income comes from private businesses. People are working for private companies, or they're running private companies, or they're content creators or comic book creators, so on and so forth. So yes, you have to include private businesses when it comes to censorship, because otherwise, like, okay, here's a good example. We all know that progressives would go on a huge rant and go out and protest if, say, Disney decided that they're not going to basically hire LGBT activists to work for their company and stuff. If they say, okay, you're vocal about the LGBT community and about, like, equal rights for the LGBT group, then they could just fire you, and then you would be blacklisted by several other companies. We all know that the left would go insane and people would be out protesting in the streets over this. We all know this. There's a reason why the Civil Rights Act was a thing. The Civil Rights Act was there so that local governments, as well as private businesses and organizations, couldn't discriminate based on race, gender, sexual identity, and religion. Here's the key. If religion counts in the Civil Rights Act, then political beliefs should count as well. Because remember, religion is a choice. You can be born into a religion, but it is your choice to leave that religion, compared to gender, race, and sexual identity, which isn't really a choice, but religion is. So if religion can count as be included in the Civil Rights Act, then political beliefs should definitely count. Now, this is my personal opinion, because I think in our very modern and privatized society that involves corporations and businesses, yeah, censorship should include the private sector. Otherwise, it's basically you get a business that's, say, run by conservatives, and they decide they're not going to allow any sort of left wing or liberal to apply, and they get blacklisted from these companies, and vice versa with progressives and the far left. So this is my point. I personally feel like what the comic book industry needs to become is a industry that embraces creative freedom and free expression and free speech, of course. Because when people are scared to express themselves, then you breed resentment and people feel like they're being oppressed. That's basically a fact. People who don't feel like they can express themselves normally develop very almost radical and extreme personalities. It's one of the reasons why we have the alt-right going around doing all this stuff, because they feel like they can't express themselves, they can't talk about their opinions without being slandered and labeled. So that's why they're out there like protesting and having incidents like the Charlottesville riots happen. So this is just my point is that the comic book industry, in my opinion, as is right now, should flatline, because then we can restart over and build a new and better industry that isn't that isn't made up like a club where only these specific kinds of people can be a part of it, where it's like a left-wing only industry for basically progressives. So this is my personal opinion, because I think any sort of industry that relies on creative expression, like comic books, requires that you need to have people of many differing opinions, because then you can get the best out of a product, because then you have many different ideas swirling around, and people need to not be so outraged about comic books that they deem offensive, So yeah, it's like the book industry. The book industry does so well because the book industry allows people to, to create in the industry, even if they're despite their political beliefs. Like, when you compare comic books to novels, novels have a lot more political diversity compared to comic books. Comic books are very left-leaning and stuff. There are some right-wing comic books, but they're very far and few in between when you compare them to progressive books. So that's the thing. I feel like the more politically diverse the comic book industry will get, the better off it will be, because then people can basically say, hey, there's a book out there for me, there's a book out there for them. And, the fringe groups don't like sharing space with each other. So when everyone begins to share a space of differing political ideas, then the fringe groups and all the extremists will disappear because they hate that. The SJWs will more likely disappear when they realize that they have no choice but to share space with conservatives, because they hate conservatives with a burning passion. It's the same thing with the far right and stuff. They also won't like it having to share space with people who basically they consider to be people who perpetuate white genocide as well as the destruction of Western culture and stuff. So in my personal opinion, the best way to get rid of radicals is to have people that they hate join the industry, so that they will have to share space with them, which will make them want to flee and go off and do their own thing. So this is my personal opinion. I do personally feel like that if the industry keeps going the way it is now, then it will have to basically flatline and restart over. I don't know if you have any questions, you have any ideas that you want to voice, with how the industry can fix itself, then you can leave that in a comment below. In the meantime, if you want to support my channel, then please hit the like button, subscribe. This is Billy the Conqueror, signing out.